In this lesson, we'll be pre-composing the individual pieces of our interface just to kind of group things together again and get everything a little bit more manageable inside that main interface comp. Okay, so now that we have our footage kind of laid down here, we've got this looking pretty good as far as the way that this is integrated with the table. I'm ready to go inside of this interface comp and start working. So let's go ahead and double click, just go inside of here, and you'll see kind of how huge this is. So we've got so many pieces inside of here, and all of them are going to be able to be animated. So that's why we have so many layers here, really quite a few. Now those first two layers that were there were part of the Illustrator file that we're not going to be using. So you can go ahead and select both of those and delete them if you want. We're not going to be needing those. But then now we have just all of these other pieces. So what I want to do is come in here and start to pre-compose these layers together so that we're able to just kind of have everything grouped a little bit better. So if I just click right there, you can see that that's kind of that main layer of the clock, but we have all of these other pieces for the clock too, such as the little hour and minute hands and the centers of those dials. So let's go ahead, and because these have already been named so helpfully, just very descriptively, we can just really quickly kind of pre-compose those together simply by looking at the layer names. So I'll just go ahead and select everything to do with clocks right there, just all of those layers, and then we'll hit Control-Shift-C and call this clocks. And that's going to force me to use that move all attribute since I'm selecting more than one layer. Okay, so now what we're getting here is basically this clock layer is kind of just covering everything up because now it's taking up that whole composition size. So what I want to do is go inside of that clocks comp and kind of just create a smaller comp instead of how large this is. Now, normally you might think, okay, well then I'll have to select everything, put it in the middle of my composition, and start changing my composition settings until I get that to be the right size. But there's definitely a faster way that you can do that, and I'm going to show you how. So we're just going to zoom in right here, and we're going to use the region of interest. So that's just this little button right here next to that transparency grid. So if you grab region of interest, it's going to give you these little crosshairs, and you can just draw the area that you want to be your comp. So I'll go ahead and just draw that spot right there, and then come up here to composition and tell it to crop comp to region of interest. So we'll go ahead and click that, and that's just going to really quickly allow us to draw that space, crop it just kind of like you would in Photoshop, and then it's just going to give us a comp that is this smaller, much more manageable size. So now if we go back out to the interface comp, one of the drawbacks of this is that it moves this to the center of everything really. So we'll have to come back in here and kind of reposition this as we go. So it is going to be a lot more helpful, and now we can click on other things instead of simply trying to click and, oh no, this is on top of everything because it's the whole size of the comp. So you will have to go in there and kind of just work on that to make that exactly where you want it to be again. But let's go ahead and kind of go through here and do this for a few more layers just to get an idea of that process and really get you comfortable with it. So I'm going to just start at the top, and I'm going to select all of those news layers that have anything to do with news. That's going to be this little button right here. We'll select them all, hit Control-Shift-C, and go ahead and we'll call this news. Go and say OK, and you can just double click inside of there. Where I zoom in, and one little trick is if you want to zoom in and you're having a hard time zooming in on what you want, if you hold Alt and put your arrow in the place that you want to zoom, it's going to zoom to your arrow. So that can save you a little bit of time if you're needing to zoom in closer here like I am. So I'll go ahead and grab that region of interest again. We'll just drag that back around, and if I need to kind of reposition this, I can do that as well. I don't have to have it in exactly the right position on the first try. So just come in there and kind of move those edges. Then just go back up there to composition and say crop to region of interest. And then we'll come back out here and move that back into position. And sometimes it can take a minute just because we have so many pieces going on here. You may even want to turn that resolution down a bit so you can move a little bit more quickly. And these also don't have to be in the perfect position because obviously just from kind of what we were looking at in the last few lessons, we're going to have to start moving some things around. So it's okay. Don't worry about it. We'll just kind of get this back into a semblance of what it looked like and then go from there. Now let's go ahead and do this for our kilowatt hours. So go ahead and select all of those. Hit Control-Shift-C. We'll call this kilowatt. Say okay. And again, just to kind of reinforce this, if I try to select anything, I can't get to it because my whole comp is the size of that kilowatt comp. And vice versa. So that's the only thing I can move unless I lock that layer. So we'll go ahead and go back inside of there. Just zoom in a little bit. Come over here to crop region of interest. We'll just draw a little box there. And go ahead and come up to composition, crop to region of interest. So hopefully you're getting the hang of this and it's not going to be too confusing for you. So we'll just kind of move along here. And most of these are pretty straightforward for what goes with what as far as these pieces up here. But I'm going to focus on a few of the other ones just so that you can really get this. Now these numbers here are going to be part of this comp that we'll be working with later on. So what I'm going to do is just go ahead and bring these over here, just kind of right on top of that like that. I'm just dragging that and it took a little bit to catch up with me. And now what I want to do is just come down here. We'll just kind of cycle through here till we come to this counting meter. And it looks like that's going to be right there. So that's going to be these three pieces, but it's also going to be the numbers. So we'll scroll down until we get to those numbers, and I'm just going to control click to add that to that selection. So those are not really close together, but those are going to go together later on in our course. So we'll go ahead and Control Shift C, and we'll call this number counter. Go ahead and say okay to that. And we'll come up here to the composition right there. Oh, that's clocks. Let's scroll down. There it is, a little bit further down. And then we'll just kind of zoom in here. And it's not important that I'm able to see all of those numbers. So I'm just going to go ahead and choose the region of interest and base it on the size of that circle. So we'll just kind of start from right there. And then I'll just go ahead and go to composition, crop comp to region of interest. And if you want to, you can put the numbers on top of everything, just kind of like that. And then let's go back up to our interface and we can put that in position and just drag that down. So we need to do this for pretty much all of our layers, and it's probably going to be pretty boring for you to watch me do every single one. So I'm going to go ahead and go through and do this for a few more. And these pieces right here, I'm going to leave as separate from this folder, even though they're all on top of the folder. But we do need to eventually comp them together into a pre-comp. So I'll go ahead and do some of these pieces, and then once we come back in the next lesson, you can either start back up with the project file there once those have been cropped, or just see what I cropped and then do it yourself to get a little bit of practice. But you get the idea of how this works and really how it's helpful to do this. And it's unfortunate that you can't do it through Illustrator. If you group something inside of Illustrator, it's not going to be able to look inside that group and grab those layers to give you the capability of animating them. So that's kind of why we have to do it this way. Maybe in the future they'll add that functionality. That would be really helpful, save you some time because it's fewer steps to do it that way. But we're going to work with what we've got, and we'll come back in the next lesson with this part finished up, and then we'll start some of our animation.